and what remains to be done or undone.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Well, I know we have a brief time, but I just want to take a moment and thank and acknowledge my wife Donna for being here tonight. Thank you. Without her, none of this is possible because this is a team, a partnership effort. So thank you, dear. And two other folks, my father, DeLong, who I've learned that I'm never too old to get good advice from, so thank you for that. And my aunt, Shirley Rock, thank you very much for being here today. And to our new member, I'm sure you're going to be a much more faithful attender of Rotary than I've been recently, but very welcome to have you here. In fact, I think it's been so long since I've been here that the last time I was here, the food was good. Okay, that's the last of the cheap shots. Well, I am delighted to be here today. It's a very important election for our country. I'm glad we've chosen topic one to be the economy. Clearly, growing the economy and creating jobs is the most important challenge in front of us today as a country. And we need to do it. We need to dig out of the hole that we're in. We have an enormous national debt that's been created by the politicians in Washington. It's now over $15 trillion. The last 3 or 4 years, they've generated, not us, they've generated over $1 trillion in debt every year, and that's wrong. That's wrong. As Americans, we all work hard. It's why we belong to Rotary. We invest in our communities. We invest in our families. We do not generate debt to pass to the next generation. That's what's currently happening today. We need to fix that. We need to fix it as quickly as possible. We need to get to a balanced budget. How do we do that? We do it in a couple of ways. First of all, we need to cut the cost of the federal government. It has doubled in the last 10 years. 10 years is 2 administrations, by the way, 7 years under Republican, 3 years under a Democrat. So it's not the other party's fault, it's both parties' fault that we're in this predicament. We need to cut costs. Think about it in your business or personal lives. Who here has doubled their expenses in the last 10 years without any meaningful revenue growth? We need to fix that. But you can't cut all your way there. Although there'll be painful cuts, you cannot cut your entire way there. We need to grow revenues. Now to me, growing revenues is not raising taxes. That's not how you grow revenues. Growing revenues is growing the economy. If we can grow our economy, everybody benefits. If you're unemployed, you have an opportunity for a job. If you're underemployed, you'll get a better job. If you're stuck mid-career, you have opportunities to get out of that rut. And by the way, if you're in the company, you're in the senior management, and the economy's growing, you're going to do better too. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think we need to continue the class warfare of saying, well, it's their fault. They're not paying their fair share. I think we need to grow the economy so everybody benefits. Everybody does better. That's how we get out of this. And by the way, when everybody does better, the government's going to do better as well, because as those of you know, the government's going to take their piece at the local, state, and federal level. So how do you do that? Well, one of the ways that you do it is don't continue to add more and more and more regulations on the private sector.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll continue later. I've gotten the eye here from Mr. Kiesel. Thank you very much. To be continued.
Can you hear me on this one? You don't need it. I too want to thank the Rotary Club for inviting me. It's a pleasure. First of all, it's amazing to see so many people here, and I congratulate everyone for coming and for the club for putting this on. The first question was what can we do in Washington? What congressional actions can be done to get the economy going? Let's start with a few things that have been done or have not been done so we can lay the framework on what needs to be done. You know, the president has proposed that at the federal level, but what's been rejected by the Republican Congress so far in the House of Representatives is to support an aggressive monetary policy that promotes a stimulus policy. The Federal Reserve can do more to promote the economy, but the Federal Reserve has been stymied in terms of the actions that it can take. We have to use every tool, whether it's the Federal Reserve, in the toolbox toolbox to get this economy going. Another important thing is what has been proposed, but what is languishing, sitting in the Congress, not moving forward, is the President's American Jobs Act. What is that? It was proposed last year. It's more jobs, more growth. It would have lowered the deficit. Economists, every economist, from Goldman Sachs to the Economic Policy Institute, have said that this policy would promote up to 2 million jobs. It would boost the GDP by anywhere from 1.3 to 2%. It would help us invest in the very things that all of us want. I'm sure my opponent and I want. That's investment in schools, in infrastructure. The Congressional Budget Office said if we pass this Jobs Act, there would be a net deficit reduction in 10 years. 2/3 of Americans support the Jobs Act. It is not moving forward. So why did it not pass? It didn't pass because the members of Congress did not want it. It was the reason why the Republicans in Congress said, let's not pass the President's Jobs Act, was that it was the son of a stimulus and they didn't want another stimulus program. But let's really talk about what is a stimulus program. Another name for a stimulus program is investment, an investment in the economy, something that we need desperately. We all need to know, we all need that we need to invest in schools, roads, infrastructure, and that's exactly what the President's Job Act does. The difference between us is I vote for this, my opponent would not vote for this. Another thing that really can get the economy going is the small businesses in this country. How are we going to move forward the small businesses? Those are businesses that have less than 50 employees. In fact, most have less than 10 employees. As I go forward, I am pleased because of my legislative record over the last 14 years to have received the endorsement in this election by the California Small Business Association, made up of over 200,000 small businesses in California. The things that what we need to do, let me give specific things that we need to do now and what to promote small business. Stabilize the housing market, lower gas prices.
Senator, what should healthcare look like in 15 years? Excuse me, one of the microphones is out. Senator, you go first on this next one. What should healthcare look like in 15 years? What is the role of a freshman congressman in this controversial legislative arena?
Thank you. What I've learned already is I better be a little bit more brief, Maybe that's what healthcare needs, Over the next 15 years, our goal should be an affordable and accessible healthcare system for all of our citizens. And for that reason, I support the Affordable Care Act. It ensures that an illness will not bankrupt a family. We will not lose our health protection because of a pre-existing condition. Individuals will not lose their health insurance because they've developed an injury or an illness. We will focus on preventive health measures. Individuals and small businesses will be able to come together and to buy health care coverage at an affordable cost. The Congressional Budget Office has said rather than being something that will drive the budget deficit, that over the next 10 years, the Affordable Care Act will reduce the deficit by providing insurance for all people and reducing health care costs. So there are things that the government can do, and one of the things that I can do as a Congress member is to listen to my constituents over the next 4 years or 2 years to see how is it being implemented. Is it working or is it not? However, we also have to know that changes in healthcare are not just going to be government-driven. There are already tremendous changes that are already occurring within healthcare that we need to balance and understand. The practice of medicine, the types of hospitals that we will see, where medicine will be practiced will change over the next 15 years because it will go from a cottage industry to one that's much more technologically driven and much more based upon best practices. We will see that the new coming out of medical school and residencies and training do not want to do what the old timers wanted to do. That new medicine is, they want a real life, they want regular hours, they want a turnkey office, and they want something that's better administrated than what they've done before. The same thing will increasingly we will see in terms of hospitals. We will see that much small, the end of, not maybe the end, but maybe in small niche markets, we will see some of the more smaller hospitals, but we will see larger and larger groups and larger hospital systems in the next 15 years that we need to look at what are those best practices. I'll just finish by saying my wife is a Kaiser doctor. She practices both in the north and in the south. Kaiser is one that's doctor-driven, promotes wellness, has the highest patient satisfaction rate, and that model is something that we will be looking at much, much more, whether it's the Kaiser model or other models. Over the next 15 years, we will look at programs that are doctor-driven, but also large, which would have the orientation of large collective groups in which the emphasis is on wellness and the prevention of illness. We are going to see much more of that over the next 15 years. So we're going to get pressure from the bottom, with new people coming up wanting a different lifestyle, wanting to be parts of organizations that promote wellness, and the government playing a role to make sure that we have a level playing field. That's where it will be done. And I think the first step is the Affordable Care Act, which I support. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Alan for pointing out one of the differences between us when it comes to the economy. We have a government that we can't afford today. We're deficit spending over $1 trillion, and he thinks the answer is more government. I think that's crazy. But that's the difference between us. I'm in the private sector. I've been in it for 35 years, 25 years running a small business, 10 years in a corporate environment. I just don't spend money I don't have. My wife will vouch for how frugal I am at home. I don't think we need more government. I think what we need is we need government to get out of the way. We have the best economy, the best capitalists, the best network in the world. We need to get out the back of the private sector and let it do what it do best, and we will grow ourselves out of this economy. That is the answer. It is not more government. More government is more what we have to do. But let me be clear. I am not anti-government. I just believe we should have as much government as we can afford. That's it. In regard to health care, I think there's three things that we want. We do want improved access. We want everybody to have access to health care. We all want that as Americans. I think we want to improve the quality of care, have the opportunity to do so. And we want health care to be more affordable. We've had these huge increases in health care costs, whether it be insurance or at the physician's office over the last decade and more. Does the Affordable Care Act provide those things? That's the question. Clearly it does not. I think it helps with, number one, improving access. I think there are some benefits, covering pre-existing conditions, covering youth to 26. I think there's some good parts to that. But it fails miserably on the other two items. We've talked about our economic situation. Why in the heck would we be willing to spend, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, $1.8 trillion that we don't have in the next 10 years? Does that make sense to you, that we're going to borrow money from China to spend on American health care and get further in debt? Does that make sense to anybody in this room? Because I'll tell you, it does not make sense to me. And as I talk to doctors, and I talk to healthcare administrators, and I talk to professionals in the healthcare industry, what I hear from them is they are very concerned. They are concerned that doctors are going to leave the field. They want things to be better. They spent their lives investing in healthcare. They want it to be better. They want to see change. It's not perfect. It can get better. We need to work to make it better. But we can't work to make it better by spending $1.8 trillion. That is just absolutely crazy. But there are things we can do. We can do tort reform and try and get rid of those frivolous lawsuits which are increasing the cost of health care. We can allow you to purchase health care across state lines to make it more competitive. We can allow small business owners and individuals to be able to do a tax write-off for their health insurance costs, because large businesses get the opportunity to do that. We can expand health savings accounts. There are a number of things that we can do. And I think what we should listen to is we should listen to the medical care professionals explain to us what needs to be improved, and that we need to partner with them as an elected official to make those things happen. That's what I'll do as a congressman. Thank you.
modification to existing legislation, if any, would improve or degrade the quality of education in our country and/or be beneficial or harmful to our state. Please highlight threats, challenges, or opportunities as you perceive them, with an emphasis on what your role will be.
Thank you. Let me tell you what I won't do. What I won't do is what the state legislature has done. In the last 2 years, they've taken $1 billion away from the Cal State University system. Out of a $3 billion allotment, they've taken 30% away. You think that's going to improve the education for our kids? It's not. They've done similar cuts to the UC system. They've cut over 20% from the community college system. And higher education is now, in our current environment, where we need it the most. And we are failing our youth in that area. Not to mention the cuts from K through 12. We should be making more investments in education, not less. But we should make sure those funds are being invested wisely. Again, I think we need to get government out of the way to an extent. If you think of a taxpayer, for every dollar that you're investing in education, the federal government is taking a piece, the state government is taking a piece, other administrations are taking a piece. And how much of that tax dollar that you and I are paying actually end up in the classroom? Not enough. We don't care about funding the federal Department of Education or the state. We want that money to get in the classroom for our kids where they're learning. That's where we want it to go. So if you ask what will I do, I will carefully look at every taxpayer dollar, and I will make sure that it gets to where we want it to get to. In the classroom education, not in the bureaucratic overhead. Thank you.
Thank you. For the past 2 years, let me preface this by saying I have been the chair of the California Senate's Education Committee, where our major goals in the state, which I've been trying to implement, have been how do you improve student success? How do you prepare students for the world of work? How do you increase the accountability on students, teachers, and institutions? And how do you improve the way we measure this through our assessments that really make sense and that really help students succeed? My own legislation has focused on developing programs that implement that. Last year, I created the Long Beach College Promise Act, which really linked the Long Beach Unified School District with the Long Beach Community College to be able to better share resources and to really promote our seamless educational system. This year, I'm the author of the California Student Success Act, which really changes the very nature of our community colleges. It really says that the emphasis should be on when students enter that we develop educational plans, each student, that we focus on and we prioritize those courses that meet those students' educational plans so that they end up from the community college with either a degree, with either a transfer to a four-year school, or they end up from the community colleges with the workforce credentials to enter the workforce through some kind of certificate process. That's what we really need to do in this. And we need to do this in a timely way. The problems are that we need to work, as we've done in the state, and with a partnership between our local communities, our different institutions, and the state, and we need to do that with the federal government. It will not help us in the sequestration if we cut approximately $350 million in federal funds from education. We must continue to fund education at the level. And right now, at the federal level, we have the No Child Left Behind. That sets the guidelines for what we have to do as a state, and what all states have to do. There are some problems with that we need, and as a new Congress member, I would need to work on. It needs to be reauthorized. It needs to have a better way of coming up with a better system of assessments. It has to have realistic goals. It does not do it. It mandates lots of things back to the local states, but does not provide the states with the resources to do that. We need to change that and become better as a partnership. There are some exciting things, though, that are occurring also that we need to do. Right now, all the states have come together to form what is called the Common Core Standards. We are going to set curriculum so that no matter what state you're in, you will receive approximately the same kinds of skill level in your educational level. We need to ensure that California is able to function in that new Common Core set of standards. We need to make sure that the federal government helps us do that, to implement the Common Core standards. In this way, that we will continue to move our educational system forward. There is no doubt that in the last few years, California has gone through some economically difficult times, just as the nation. Everyone has had to take their share of cuts. We have not increased revenues. We have not increased taxes. The only way to do that is to take. Do I like to take these cuts? No. But the fair thing is every institution, every program in an economy, it's easy to say you
thank you.
cuts,
That's we're out of time. If we
but
can
it's
start.
difficult to do it. Thank you.
Senator, I'm sorry to cut you off. If you remain standing for the next question. Describe your congressional duty in the context of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. That's you, Senator. Thank you. I wish we had more time, everybody.
Thank you. You know, as a Congress member, I am sworn, we are all sworn to uphold our duty to the Constitution, to establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, to provide for the common defense, to promote the general welfare, and supply the blessings of liberty. I believe all of these goals are equally important. Not one is more important than any of the others. The invasion of Afghanistan was a good example of providing for the common defense. We took out the Al-Qaeda training bases. We attacked Al-Qaeda directly. On the other hand, staying in Afghanistan for more than a decade is a bad example of it. Iraq is even more spurious. The invasion of Iraq did not provide for the common defense. In fact, you could argue that invading Iraq and staying in Afghanistan and Iraq have harmed the goals of the Constitution. These wars created less justice, less domestic tranquility. They've taken away from the general well-being and the welfare of the country. I believe that really what we need to do is to find a balance. And what we need to do is to support that balance in the federal budget. Balance that protects the middle class, supports workers and small businesses, provides for them in terms of need, and what that means is that military spending become more efficient. Over the past decade, over $100 billion has been spent on military systems that have been canceled or dropped. Completely wasted funds that have to be corrected, have to be changed. I'll go further. By allowing for gross inefficiencies in the military, we're undermining our national defense. Second, in any instance, we have to weigh the realities of combat versus the reality of our national economy. As an American public, we were sold a bill of goods about the Iraq War. We were told that there were weapons of mass destruction and that we had to go in and invade. There were no weapons of mass destruction. As far as Afghanistan, we spent over $550 billion, which the primary mission was to eliminate the threats of Al-Qaeda. That's right, that was a good mission, but we've overspent our time there and we've been there for too long. Instead of building, nation building, which we've done, we should be spending our time building our own nation. That's what I've been doing about Afghanistan. Thank you.
Gosh, I think we found an area that Al and I have some agreement on, at least a part of it. But before we get there, let's go back to education for a minute. I can tell you I don't want my congressional representative to figure out the education process. I looked at King Alexander at Cal State Long Beach. I looked at Eloy over his Long Beach City College. Well, we'll get John said, we'll get 3.5 minutes. And the other thing that I would do is I would make sure that those professionals have appropriate funding. When you say their fair share, 30%, are you kidding me? What have we done for pension reform? Where's that 30%? So I think what we need to do is
reiterate the question to Councilman. I wanted you to describe your congressional duty in the context of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
We'll talk about education more another time. What's Congress's role when it comes to national defense? You don't want Congress micromanaging the world. the war, that's what the military is for, and under the commander-in-chief. But it is Congress's responsibility to appropriate funds for the war. And that's one of the shortcomings. We didn't do that. Washington didn't do that. You have to pay for it in more taxes, which is never popular, or you cut expenses. This is one of the first times in American history we paid for that war on a credit card. And that's wrong, and that doesn't help any of us, because then we're not vested in it. I do agree with Alan. I think we've stayed far too long. I think we have too much work to do at home building our nation, as he said, not nation building in other countries. So while I absolutely support a strong national defense, I would be very, very, very careful about putting our men and women in the military service in harm's way, and it would always be the very last resort after everything else has been done. I also think it's Congress's responsibility to provide appropriate oversight. So if it is not going in the direction that we were told it was going to go in, then Congress needs to get involved and make sure that it gets back on track or it comes to a speedy conclusion. And the last thing that I think that Congress has responsibility for is to make sure that we make appropriate investments that when our men and women come home from serving overseas and they need, whether it be medical services or job reentry services, whatever it is, to acclimate back in our society, for those that put their lives on the line, we absolutely owe it to them and their families to make sure that they're taken care of when they come home. And as your congressional representative, I promise to do that. Now you're about finished. I see we have 13 minutes. Can we do a little Q&A? I'm happy to take some questions. I think that was the last one.
So we came up here today to have a community forum. We're going to take 4 questions. We discussed these. We made sure those were good questions. And that's it. There's not a Q&A format today. I wanted to make sure that everyone came here and felt comfortable about talking about what I thought were 4 major issues which concerned us all. Thank you all for coming today. President?